Good morning, everyone. So this is the topic six in our learning or in our course ethics. So this is topic six, ethics through thick and thin and ethics and globalization. So ethics could very interesting, no, in terms of globalization because it challenges the philosophical minds of the students with these questions. So how may the course of ethics from previous chapters help a student engage ethical dilemmas on global landscape with all its ramifications from consumerism, capitalism, neoliberalism, individualism, religious fundamentalism, and the fanaticism and terrorism. So those are the things that we need to question regarding this topic. No? So we have three learning outcomes with regards to this topic. So the first one is at the end of this chapter as a topic, the students are expected to explain globalization and pluralism as challenges to ethics. The next one is to evaluate challenges that millennials encounter in relation to ethical behavior. And lastly, explain the role of religion in ethics. So as I said, we have underneath three lessons with this topic. Number one, or lesson number one, is globalization and pluralism, the new challenges to ethics. So this first topic discusses the challenges of globalization in ethics. This is an important concept for students to understand and appreciate since daily experiences at the school or in our home community are an integral part of globalization process. With globalization, however, are the issue set of pluralism, liberalism, loss of cultural values and an identity, and the disenchantment that go with it. Studying globalization could help us understand the difference and similarities of different cultures and to understand how we are connected at the same time separated from the world. The next lesson would be the challenges of millennials. The second topic dwells on the challenges of the millennials with the fast-paced lifestyles of people across the globe, brought about by globalization and the overwhelming intentions of the field of science and technology. Generalization or generation gap has become an issue, especially so that ethical dilemmas are dealt with differently among age groups, whether at home or in schools, at the workplace, and in recreation facilities or anywhere else. Ethical attitudes differ from traditionalists to the boomer, to the Gen X, to the millennials, to the Gen Z, to the iGen, and also to the Alpha generation. Hence, this topic deals directly on individualism, humanism, and secularism ideologies that influence millennials' moral compass. On that last topic, the third topic discusses of the role of religion in ethics. At the part of the religion are the moral codes and through the values they embody. They often build the basis of ethical living. Students are challenged to evaluate ethical claims of religion in the comparative way of discover the divine as guide to living fully human and fully alive. The ethical decisions and discourse of action that we take points back to the moral compass that we have embraced in this course ethics. So these three lessons are we going to discuss are the things that we will be applications or this would be the applications of the theories that we have discussed in this whole semester because we all know globalization took part in our lives in a very big event. No? So let's begin with globalization and pluralism, new challenge to ethics. So these are the learning outcomes that we need to identify in studying this lesson. By the way, topic one or the lesson one has a long range or a long lesson about globalization. So we will be tackling this maybe in a few days. So we will be giving you or we'll be discussing you today the different information about it. No? So upon the completion of this lesson, the student must be able to define globalization and explain its different dimensions, enumerate the advantages and disadvantages of globalization, evaluate the role of ethics in globalization, and analyze the challenges of pluralism through ethics. So let's begin first with the introduction. Virtually all the aspects of modern life is affected and transformed by the forces of globalization. News is shaped daily by issues concerning activities that go beyond the continent of our domestic borders. Our homes are filled with product sources from world over. We consume food coming from different countries. Even what we read, watch, and view originated from somewhere in the world. This means we are not associated and we are active participants in all these global activities. So we may find ourselves in a period of time marked by the unprecedented transformation. The fast and incessant social, cultural, economic, and technological challenges we experience make our world more and more interconnected. Globalization's dynamic power will continue to alter the way we think about our understand to people and things. As we reshape our lives, the system of our communication and the manner we relate, that many changes which globalization provoked in every society and culture have resulted in a cross-border stream of individuals, consumer goods, and information by reducing an indefinite number of obstacles among the nations. So before we proceed, let me give you first a definition of globalization. So what is globalization? So globalization is not a single concept that can be defined with certainty. Different interpretation of the terms reflect different perspectives rooted in different positions, attitudes, and benefits derived from it. There is a long line of definitions from academics, scholars, and theorists since globalization is a term first appeared in Webster's dictionary in 1961. There is a brief survey of the definition proposed by leading intellectuals and organizations over the years. Kenichi Ohane in 1992 defined globalization as the onset of the borderless world. On the other hand, Roland Robertson in 1992 referred globalization as the compression of the world and the intensification of consciousness of the world as a whole. Arjun Appadurai in 1996 positioned globalization as world of things that have different seats, access, points of origin and termination, and varied relationship to institutional constructions in different religions or regions, nations, and societies. Based on Robert Koch in 1991, he outlined the meaning of globalization as characteristic of the globalization trend to include the internationalizing the production, the new international division of labor, new migratory movement from south to north or vice versa, the new competitive environment that accelerates those processes. Frederick Jameson in 1996 also defined globalization as cultural process. Globalization means that exposition of the plurality of mutuality intersecting individually sync local differences. The emerge of new hetero-suppressed identities and the expansion of the worldwide media and technology culture with the promise of popular democratization. As the economic process, there is assimilation of integration of markets of labors of nations. So Thomas Friedman gave the meaning of globalization through inexorable integration of markets, nation states, and technologies to the degree of never witnessed before, in a way that is enabling individuals, corporations, and nation states to reach around the world faster, farther, deeper, and cheaper than ever before. And the way that is also producing the power backlashing from the brutalized or left behind by this new system. So globalization means that the spread of free market capitalism to virtually every country in the world. So in contrast, Martin Core in 1999 related globalization as what people in the third world have for several centuries called colonization. World Bank, or the WB, in 2001 defined it as a growing integration of economies and societies around the world. Robert Cohen in 2002 described it as a trend of increasing international flows and increasingly thick networks of independence. The International Monetary Fund interprets globalization as the historical process that result of human innovation and technological process. It refers to the increasing integration of economies around the world, particularly through the trade and financial flows. Pascal Lamy in 2006 referred globalization as historical state of accelerated expansion of market capitalism, like the other experience in 19th century with the Industrial Revolution. It is a fundamental formation of societies because of the social forces of a new territorial dimension. Um, Manfred says that in 2014, globalization in more general and simplified terms, but as the expansion of intensification of social relations and um, consciousness across the world time and world space. So there are so many meaning or definition of globalization that is clearly an indicator of varying opinions, discourses, and debates, and so single definition cannot be an actual claim to it. This only shows that globalization is indeed multifaceted of multidisciplinary and complex. It is also evolutionary and fluid process. Certainly, new definitions will be put towards an old definition will be revised to reflect the changing nature and content of social realities in the world today. So let's proceed with the first topic, the globalization and its dimension. So Manfred Steger in 2005 contended globalization as matured ideology for it only represents a set of political ideas and beliefs coherent enough to warrant the status of new ideology, but also constitute the dominant ideology of our time, against which all of its challengers must defend themselves. For more than a decade, there has been emerging consensus and growing acceptance among academics and thought leaders that indeed it is valid and sound ideology to perceive and explain the world. And to discuss it, it is imperative to divide the ideological landscape into three broad regions or dimensions. The first one is economic globalization, next is political globalization, and last is cultural and sociological globalization. So let's proceed with economic globalization. Economic globalization refers to the mobility of people, capital, technology, goods, and services internationally. It is also about how integrated countries are in the global economy and how different countries and regions become more economically interdependent with one another. Economic globalization is also about globalization of production and trade of goods, financial and capital markets, technology and communication, organizational regimes and institutions, enterprises and corporations, and labor. In its economic sense, Joshi in 2009 understood globalization as a free movement of goods, capital, and services, technology, and information. It is the increasingly economic integration and interdependence of national, regional, and local economies across the world through the intensification of cross-border movement of goods, service, technologies, and capital. Over the past 3 decades, under the framework of the General Agreement of Tariffs and Trade, or what we call GATT, and the World Trade Organization, or the WTO, economic globalization um, have been expanding um, huh, as much as faster pace. So since the 1980s, economic liberalism and globalization has spread rapidly the expansion of capitalism. Countries have rapidly been cutting down trade barriers and opening up their current accounts to capital accounts. This rapid increase of pace occurred mainly with advanced economies integrating with emerging ones. They have done this by means of foreign direct investment and some across border immigration. They have also reduced trade barriers. Free trade is the main driver of economic globalization. Economic globalization has grown at an increased rate due to the movement of the efficiency of long distance transportation, advances in telecommunication and information systems, and by developing in science and technology. In some regions of the world, countries group together to form potential trade agreements and economic blocs. Main goal of this regional economic organization is to promote and adhere to the free movement of capital, labor, goods, and services. The North American Free Trade Agreement, or the NAFTA, open a free movement of goods and services, but not in labor. This has same arrangement for the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or the ASEAN. And also, European Union is common market, and therefore most of the advanced term of economic integration, allowing free movement of factors of production within the internal borders. So economic globalization is inevitable, and it helps us to promote the easy way of communicating regarding the um, market of each country. So we will now proceed on the second border, which is the political globalization. So central to any meaningful discussion of political globalization is the declining importance of non-states and the rise of other non-state actors in international politics. In fact, some actors such as multinational and transnational corporations and large international non-governmental organizations can change role of national governments and may even pose threats to sovereignty of the state. Consider this. Gross revenue of some global companies may exceed combined gross domestic product of several small Saharan or Latin American states in most likelihood countries that operate hub branches. Political globalization is primarily concerned with the growth and expansion of the global political system and its institutions, the creation and continued existence of the United Nations, and the classic example of this topic. So Valentin Mog- Mogadam in 2005 outlined key trends towards the expansion, multilateralism, emerge of transnational state apparatus, and the emerge of international non-governmental organizations that would provide oversight function to the national government. Political globalization has also been discussed in the context of emancipatory possibilities towards greater global democratization and the creation of kind of global civic society by transnational advocacy networks. Political globalization is also spurred debate about the primacy of nation states in international relations and about notion of global governance. Hyper-globalists argue that globalization is eroding state boundaries and nation states lose significance. However, this is contested by the nationalists and skeptics who argue that it is not pragmatic as supranational organizations, such as United Nations, do not have the powers and therefore limited enforces resolution. They maintain that state actors remain supreme in international um, relations. For you to be able to understand more about political organization, it is as simple as saying that even though we have United Nations, we have um, ICC, yung international court na yan, we always, this international law still respect the sovereignty of each country because the international believe that every nation has a right to practice their individuality or the sovereignty of each country. Okay? So now we will proceed to the third border, the cultural and sociological globalization. So let's focus first on the cultural globalization. So, excuse me, James in 2006 defined cultural globalization as a transmission of ideas, meanings, and values around the world in such way as to extend that intensify social relations and expansion of social relations is not merely observed on the material level, but also involves the information of shared norms and knowledge with which people associate with individual and collective cultural identity. Furthermore, Stedger and James in 2010 pointed out cultural globalization as harbinger of increased interconnectedness among different populations and cultures. Watson cited or argued in 2016 that as a result of the diffusion of commodities and ideas, everyday life reflects a standardization of cultural expression around the world. Such cultural globalization may lead to monoculturalism or the adoption of the culture of the dominant group. This process is also understood as cultural imperialism, wherein dominance by homogenealized and westernized consumerist culture tends to destroy and alienate cultural identities of minority groups. The global influence of American product business and culture in other countries around the world has been referred to as Americanization. So Americanization has become more prevalent since the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. Greater Americanization became more widespread through the high-speed internet, a smartphone technology since 2008. American-based TV programs are also rebroadcast to the world over the Netflix, Amazon channel, or any other companies that promotes the shows. And also, some of the companies such as McDonald's, um, the um, Subway, those are some of the Coca-Cola, Pepsi, those are some of the multi Americanized companies that dominated the market in the whole world. No? So, as you could see, cultural globalization is really driven by advances in information technology, wireless communication, electronic commerce, popular culture, and international travel and migration. Not only pala Americanization has been developed, also the spread of Korean craze regarding the um, TV series, movies, and also in songs are dominant since 2010. So as you could see, this same trend toward cultural homogeneity and standardization of human experience to also scholars, this appears to be an overstatement of the phenomenon. So according again to Watson in 2016, although homogenizing influence do exist, they are far from creating anything akin to a single world culture. Another alternative perspective argues that in reaction to the process, of cultural globalization, the class of civilization might appear. So Samuel Huntington in 1993 emphasized the fact that while the world is becoming smaller and interconnected, the interaction between peoples of different cultures enhance the civilization consciousness and in turn invigorative differences. Indeed, rather than reaching a global cultural community, the difference of culture sharpened by the very process of cultural globalization will be a source of some complex. Oh, there are some whole gamut of conflicting claims and opinion of clashing of civilization. So with this, it intensifies the sense of local differences. On one hand, cultural imperialism, greater cultural homogeneity, and uniformity of experience on the other. So now we were going to proceed on the sociological globalization. Alvaro and King in 1990 defined globalization from the sociological perspective as all this process by which the people of the world are incorporated into a single world society. In this work, in the consequences of modernity, Giddens in 1991 writes globalization can thus be defined as the intensification of worldwide social relations which in distant localities in such a way that local happenings are sharpened by events occurring many miles away and vice versa. Robertson in 1992 described globalization as the compression of the world and intensification of the consciousness of the world as a whole. So in his book, The Global Transformation, it stated that although it is simplistic sense, globalization refers to widening, deepening, and speeding up the global interconnection, such as definition begs further elaboration. Globalization can be on the continuum with the local, national, and regional. At one end of the continuum lie social and economic relations and networks which are organized on the local or international basis. At the other end of lie a social and economic relations and networks which crystallize on the wider scale of regional and global interaction. So globalization can refer to those special temporal process of change which underpin a transformation in the organization of human affairs by linking together and expanding human activities across regions and continents without reference to such expansive spatial connections. Based on Larson's in 2001 in his book The Race of the Pack, the real story of globalization, he states that globalization is the process of the world's shrinkage or distances getting shorter, moving closer. It pertains to increasing ease with which somebody on the side of the world can interact, mutual benefit with someone on the other side of the world. As the phenomenon of globalization continues to increase, its spread of the exchange of transfer of goods, services, and capital across borders. So it invites everybody to come together to connect and unite in a common interest of focus without regard to geography, distance, or in language. So as knowledge of worldview, virtues, and social practices and products, there are other components that coverage these people not only to communicate but also to collaborate. Due to the faster, further, and deeper global integration complex, issues abound to a rate which cannot be ignored. So these are the pose of new challenges and problems which are global in nature. So global challenges and problem demands global solutions. So this requires a new thinking or new ideas and new solutions. So let's begin with the global and this content. So many are critical and skeptical about the claimed benefits of globalization. Among them are the Nobel Prize winner for economics, Joseph Stiglitz, as articulated in the controversial book Globalization and its Discontent in 2002. He argued that globalization must be reinforced further to reap potential full rewards and advocate providing safety nets for reinforced further reap potential of full rewards and advocates providing safety nets for people left out by the process. Some critics are more progressive or aggressive, rejecting it outright, the calling for countries to totally abandon the globalization project. Nevertheless, these are just some of the big arguments against globalization and some of the moral dilemmas facing us in our time. Okay, so let's proceed with globalization and income inequality. Though globalization, particularly economic globalization, has its rewards, countries derive unequal benefits from it, and as a result tends to widen divided between the poor countries and the south to the richer countries on the north. Countries deeply engaged in globalization have reported widening income gaps and measure of the coefficient ratio according to Asian Development Bank. So before, China implemented a reform and an open door policy starting in 1978. So the sleeping giant become now an awakened giant that dominates our economic global um, market. So as you could see, the economic progress in China give us a new perspective of in income inequality. Because as you can see, the labor in, and let's proceed with the next topic, the the globalization labor condition and the environment. Now, so you can see in China, because of the low cost or the low payment for labor forces are cheap, that is why most of the factories of the Western countries or popular products can be seen in China, in Taiwan, in this part of the countries wherein the payment for labor is cheap. So by the first and foremost, sinasabi dyan, the globalization, particular economic globalization, and access reward. So it is said that being the first and foremost concern for free trade and dismantling of barriers to trade, proponents of globalization, according to critics, tends to overlook the process of how goods and products are made. WTO has premier body of trade dispute, arbitration, rules and ideas at a country that cannot be embargo a good because of the object of the process which it is made. Only an equal or content is relevant. It has become a product of the demanding to the environment, so it cannot be rejected. Underdeveloped countries do not want to pursue or pressured to impose labor environment standards as it will always make their product more costly. They want the environmental standard as it will make their product that make people in the West may regard low paying jobs. So according to Field in 2012, standard economic development fueled by manufacturing and exporting in rapidly advancing economies such as China and India led to increased product, coal consumption, and other world carbon dioxide emissions. So let's proceed with globalization and democracy. It is a well-established view by many globalization encourage democratic institutions which promote democracy. As a global market relies on capitalist democratic values, it is inevitable that organizations that enforce these values are rewarded. They can expand into countries with other forms of government and promote these ideals. So globalization causing the decline of nation states as governments no longer have control over their economy, their trade, and their borders. Nation states may have in the past been in complete control of their market, exchange rates, and the capital. Now, transitional companies have become increasingly imperative to the economy and the state becoming obsolete. This supports the argument that globalization is reducing power of democracy and the state, resulting to hollow um, democracy. So skeptics and Kwan and Ruveni in 2003, believe that the whole globalization promotes opportunity for growth and increase in wealth. It has also increased the socioeconomic disparity between people, making nations less democratic and progressively more ruled by wealthy multinationals. This only means that governments now try to compete for foreign capital and design their policies to please global investors and firms who may not act as a best interest nor be held accountable to the voters. It follows the level of democracy decline. Also, scholars such as Peter Drucker in 1994 argue that globalization cripples even more those who are less fortunate and um, previously states. Now, companies who are unable to compete with multinationals on the international scale lose from this economic openness, and this results for the loss caused by the weakening in the country's democracy. Another argument by O'Donnell in 1993 is that in order for the stable and functioning democracy to work, the concept of citizenship and participation must be active and embedded in the population. So according to him, globalization has an active transformed the common citizen into an individual who is more willingly, no, um, to pursue its own economic interest than to be concerned with politics. So there are also other meaning or other arguments regarding globalization and democracy. So Samir in 1996 pointed out even in international community, globalization has increased the cleavage between the developed countries from different parts of the world. In an international organization such as UN, it is commonly witnessed that the elite wealthy countries always have the final say in a conflict or an important issue that are being discussed in this organization, which end up swaying domestic politics and less developed countries to their favor. So globalization and cultural values and identity are being questioned. Based on Stephen and Allen in 1999, contend that cultural globalization that we are witnessing today is not the net result of human endeavor and experience, and even it is not equitably be benefited for cultural diversity. Rather, it is a manifestation of dominance of certain overpowering culture. They emphasize that the efforts made to conform for the aggressive culture or interpret Western culture in a various part of the world have had disastrous results and have revealed a tantamount amount of cultural gap. So, Mufassar in 2002 points out that global um, consumerism is now forming a homogeneous global culture wherein indigenous culture of any part of any region in the world have replaced by Western culture or other cultures. The sociologist James Kuhlman in 1990 notes that the alienation of society with their history and their fascination with foreign values. Um, According to him, these new values and beliefs do not root connection to their national identity. So therefore, globalization have weakened the tradition and values of local culture for the sake of universal uniformity and dominance of the commanding culture through the formative power of international media. So, as you could see, this um, this familiarity, or not to say democracy, is now being questioned because of the dominant culture. So it is said that the social media plays a vital role in spreading this information or this um, what we call the integrating of or emerging of culture. So therefore, mass media is an instrument in the hands of the ruling class, not that only justify its authority, but it gains the support of its audience. With this in mind, many communicators, scholars, and advocates of alternative media call for preservation of territorial integrity and protection of national identity by establishing special media for specific groups and audiences. To them, the advent and strengthening of media alternatives represent the capability of various societies in introducing their own needs and pointing views through utilization of advanced and up-to-date technology. So with that, we are now finished with the half of the topic for the lesson one. So always bear in mind that globalization is a complex relationship regarding with the people that surround the rule making or the people that promote the integration of this culture. Okay? So with that, this is the end of our lesson. I do hope you learned something from our topic for today. So with that, I'll be dismissing you. Thank you so much for attending our online class and have a great day ahead.